Presenting the Stratford Monument, Part 1. Stay, passenger. This is Holy Trinity Church in Stratford upon Avon. It is home to the most famous monument to a writer in the world. But everything is not what it seems in this monument. We'll start with the engraving, or at least the inscription in brass beneath the monument. One of the first things I noticed when I looked at it was this odd sentence. SIEH, all that he hath writ. Notice that the Y stands for thorn, and the uppercase T inserted in it is an abbreviation for that. We have Alexander Waugh to thank for the discovery of what this really means. IE in German is pronounced E. So, quite simply, as he says in one of his videos on Where is Shakespeare Buried, it is see all that he hath writ. It's possible that it's also in More Monkey Business in Stratford or Monkey Business in Stratford. So, see all that he hath writ. Well, what has he writ? It's down there underneath his hand. According to Waugh, and I am inclined to agree with him, all that he hath writ is nothing. This ironic interpretation may be correct. Now, let's see what this means. And I have John Alexander to thank, who got this idea from Christopher Johnson. We can see SIEH as an anagram. Instead of see all that he hath writ, he is all that he hath writ. Now, if we're talking about the man whose hand is above the paper, then that means he is nothing. If we are talking about the man whose name is on the title pages of the quartos and the first folio and the poems, he is means he has put his life into all that he had written. Now, let's look at the engraving. We're going to ignore the Latin because Alexander Waugh has done a good job of deciphering what that means. But I have a question about this inscription. Where is hic jacet, or here lies? It is normally seen in inscriptions and also grave markers from the classical period. We're going to concentrate on the English and the little obituary at the bottom because, again, Alexander Waugh has done a good job taking a look at the puzzles inside the Latin inscription. But we're going to begin with an error of fact. That, to insiders who knew the dates of the Stratford man's life, will show them that something is wrong, where they have to look at the inner workings of this thing to try and figure it out. What's up with this number 53? 1616 minus 1564 is not 53. That's the first clue. Something's odd going on with this inscription. Next, there are too many commas. As B. Rowland Lewis said in the Shakespeare Documents, Facsimiles, Transliterations, Translations, and Commentary, Volume 2, from Stanford University Press in 1941, it suffers from too generous a use of commas, a number of which, even in the light of more modern close punctuation, such an employment of commas is not wholly in the early 17th century convention. Now we'll start with a word count. We'll begin with the words in the main block of text. There are 52. It's the real age the Stratford man died. There are also 5 words that we count in the obituary. Why count only these words? Well, in a very, very clever use of a word, when we die, we stop. And that's an inside little clever joke to say, stop counting words here. 52 plus 5 is 57, which is 17 plus 40, and another 1740 illusion. We next turn to an enigmatic word and a puzzle. What's this word here? Most scholars see that as canst, but what's this letter here that begins the word? Notice the serif in the green ellipse. Obviously, it's the letter G. How can we prove that it's a letter G? Well, by looking at other words. There's not a G here in deck. We don't have that crossbar serif. There's not a G in cost. And there's not a G in quick. But passenger has a G. Ghost has a G. Page has a G. Living has a G. This is G-A-N-S-T. And a quick search through Google online will tell us exactly what G-A-N-S-T means. It's an archaic word, and it means it's the second person simple past tense of begin. What does this say now? If you assume that read can also mean solve or puzzle out or figure out, this little phrase now means solve if you have begun. Begun what? Well, begun to read this inscription. It's a challenge. Part of the puzzles in here is that this is not within. Notice the space within the TH ligature and the I in. Same size as the space above it. Just to that one's right. The space next to it. And right below it. This is therefore with. Now, I'm going to present a simple puzzle that was figured out and solved by Alexander Waugh, but he didn't quite get some of the instructions that are hidden here. We start here at the comma and end at the colon. And why do we do that? Well, the puzzle clue is the dangling T and placed on line 2, and the line also ends with no punctuation, contrary to every other line in the inscription. So, rearrange only 2 words, but here are the more important instructions. On line 2, shift a word by 2 words. On line 3, we shift a word by 3 words. Again, rearrange only 2 words. For those who haven't seen Alexander Waugh's solution to this, pause here and try and figure it out. Otherwise, I'm going to continue. Here we see the words rearranged. Whom hath envious death placed with Shakespeare in this monument? Shakespeare, not Shakespeare with the E between the K and the S, which would make it a long A. Just like it's spelled on page 2 of the Epistle Dedicatory, as you can see to the left and right of it. This is why with and in are separate, as another clue. But what does this mean? With whom? Is this with whom? And a hint to the riddle? Notice the letter E on whom. It is not found in the same word on the line directly above it in line 2. It is another clue. There's something else going on. And it also figures in another puzzle. Who is also here? Look for repetition. Pause here and try and find the repetition. Who is here? The person known as TTTT or 4T. Can we find 2 more examples to satisfy the triasympt omnia principle? There are 4 T's on line 1, 4 T's on line 3 rather, and of course 4 T's in that block of letters that sticks out like a sore thumb and is actually 2 words with extra T's. This handily solves and satisfies the triasympt omnia principle. He is also OV with a Gematria sum of 34. Why do I say that? Well, we have an example of the triasympt omnia principle again because there are 3 of them. What does this line mean? Quick nature died, whose name doth deck this tomb. Quick nature died as living nature died. But whose name? The name on this tomb. The words specifically say this tomb. But this is not a tomb. And there is no name here on the slab in front of the high altar other than Jesus. Once again, where is hic jacet or here lies? There's room beneath the verse to add his name. There is also room above the verse to add his name in hic jacet. The inscription is deceiving us since there is no tomb. Let's go back to the main inscription. We're going to look at our next enigma. What does this mean? Far more, comma, than cost. Notice it has 17 characters. But what costs? A non-existent tomb. Now we're going to present some more Gematria sums. It's going to be a bit of a long haul, but I'm sure that people will be able to follow it quite easily. We start with Gematria sum 1. Notice the isolated uppercase letters on line 2, the I and the F. I call them isolated rather because they are not directly below any letters or characters that are on line 1. So when you take the Gematria values of all of these letters and add them up, you get a specific number. However, what about this ligature, the T and the H? As you can see, the T is directly in Hath is directly below the letter O in so. Therefore, I believe we're to include the H in this equation. To give you 8. Understand that we are only adding Gematria values within the main block of letters. We are excluding the T in placed because it has a specific purpose in some other puzzles. But when we add up all of these Gematria sums, the values rather, we get up a Gematria sum of 80. 80 alludes to a double of 4T. Gematria sum 2. Here we add the Gematria values for the TH ligatures. Don't forget the E in then. The result is 275. Then we add these values, M, E, and T, which gives us a Gematria sum of 49. The sum is 324, but that's not a number that we're associating with the writer, are we? No, we normally don't. However, remember that I said in the easy peasy way to tell secrets, way back when, that we can subtract things that are different from a sum. The things that are most different are the tiny s and the tiny t that are in the words this and that. And when we subtract those values, which add to 37, we get 287. We add the 3 digits to get the result of 17. So skeptics will ask, why isn't this ligature used, the M and the E? I believe because it is attached to these letters, the Y and the T. That brings me to a possible Gematria sum. We add the values of the M and the E to get 17. We add the similar size Y directly below it to get 22. Then we subtract the value of the T, which is embedded in the Y. The remainder is 20, which is equal to the letter V in Gematria. The letter V and the number 20 allude to that name, which is why the T and the Y are attached to name. Gematria sum 3. We add the M and the E and the T and H, which are the only ligatures on line 4, to these two values, the T and the Y. The answer will surprise you, certainly surprised me. By the way, it's found somewhere hidden on this slide. Gematria sum 4. Subtract these two values, the N and the A, from the result of sum 3. Gematria sum 5. This one's pretty simple. We add the letters of all the uppercase values on the far left margin and get 108. Now we're going to subtract the value of the dangling T because it is subtracted from the main body of the text. And what do we get? 98. Gematria sum 6. We simply add these values along the far right margin that is in the main block of text. And what we get, or 17 times 5. This is the second time we've seen the number. Now we're going to do exactly with this number what we did with the previous puzzle. We subtract the Gematria value of the uppercase T, the dangling T, from 85 to get 66. Why is that an important number? 66 is VVV in the Latin alphabet repeating count. Gematria sum 7. Here we're going to add all the values of the big uppercase letters in both of the main inscriptions, the Latin one and the English one. And the result is 204. This one we don't have to do anything more to because 204 equals 17 times 12. Gematria sum 8. As in our first Gematria sum with the English main inscription, we're going to add the Gematria values of all the uppercase letters in the Latin that are not above or below any other uppercase letters. And the sum is 83. It's not a common number we've seen, but in the Latin alphabet repeating count, the value is 0000, 4 O's, which is a visual pun on 40. Now we subtract the number of words in that Latin inscription, and we get 71, the mirror number of our base number. Gematria sum 9. Simply, we add up the Gematria values of the dangling letters on the far right margins of both inscriptions, the E and the 2 T's. And what we get is 43, which is equal to VV. Does this look familiar? We've seen 20 and 66. So now we have V, VV, and VVV as numerical allusions to the author. Gematria sum 10. We subtract this Gematria value, the uppercase I from Giudicio, from the previous sum. What's kind of interesting is that this uppercase I also appears to be outside of the margin of the main block of letters in the Latin inscription. Now, is this Gematria sum 11? Is there a Gematria sum puzzle in this section? We've seen far more comma than cost. Adding up the values of ARMORE, we get the value of 66, which of course is VVV in the Latin alphabet repeating count. And if we go back to the first folio, it equals the number of rows in a full page. Now we set the sum of 99 for the rest of the smaller letters in the fragment. 99 plus 66 is 165. Remember, however, that we can subtract things that are different from a sum. We subtract this value, 6, which is the larger uppercase F from that, to get 159. We subtract the number of words, 4, to get 155. Then we subtract the number of punctuation marks, the comma and the colon. 153 is the result, which is 17 times 9. In another cheeky little puzzle or a little authorship clue, what do these letters spell in lines 3 and 4? What is the Gematria sum of M and E again? Pretty cheeky, isn't it? Now we're going to do a combined inscription puzzle with the English inscription on the slab, which is in front of the high altar. We add all the Gematria sums that are in the Y's and the little tiny letters that are inside of them to get 190. Then we add the Gematria values of all the larger uppercase values to get 289. But remember those dangling letters? We subtract these Gematria values from it to get 234. Subtract the number of rows to get 224. Subtract the number of words to get 139. Remember, we're just doing something simple, something logical. And when we subtract the number of dangling words, we get 136, which is 17 times 8. Next, we're going to do a simple letter count. We count these letters, but ligatures count as single letters for this. The result is 236. We subtract the total number of words. And when I did this, since I'm not a mathematician and my math part of the brain doesn't really work that well, I was kind of blown away because 236 minus 57, for people who can do the math in their heads, they've already got it. But when you subtract that number from 236, you get 179. We add the digits. The result is 17. Why do I say this is important? Remember this number, 287? And this, 108 minus 19 is 98. What are the odds these numbers are random? These three sets of digits each add to 17, and they also satisfy the triasymptomnia principle. Now I'm going to give you a small enigma. It has to do with the obituary down at the bottom. If we treat these as letters, and unfortunately this little bit trace example doesn't show you that these are two uppercase I's next to the sixes. If we treat these as letters, and then we add these numbers to the Gematria sum of those letters, the two sixes, so 12. Then we add these digits to that sum, 5 plus 3 plus 2 plus 3. The sum is 43. Remember, we've seen 43 is equal to VV in the Latin alphabet repeating count. If we subtract the Gematria value of the tiny uppercase, or the uppercase letter, the smaller uppercase letter in Domini, it could have easily been put next to the O, but it's put up top to give you a hint that you're supposed to do something with it. You get 34. These are the 19 sums found in this inscription. 11 involve the number 17 in some way. 6 are multiples of 17. 2 are mirrors of 17, the number 71. 3 are digit sum numbers that add to 17. 3 are multiples of 20. 2 have Latin alphabet repeating count values of VV. 1 has a Latin alphabet repeating count value of VVV. 1 has a Latin alphabet repeating count value of OOO. O, which is a visual pun on 4 O's, or 40. We see these numbers over and over again in the authorship game. Don't miss part 2, those dusty bones. Thank you for watching. Stay safe.